He fired me right before my $80,000 bonus. Too bad I recorded him sleeping with the exec who helped frame me. Now he's in prison, and I lead the department he used to run. Let's rewind to how I destroyed the man who tried to destroy me. Have you ever worked your butt off for something that could change your entire life, only to have it snatched away the second it became valuable? If so, this one's for you. My name is Callan Ridge, I'm 28 years old, and I found out on a Tuesday morning that trust is the most expensive thing you can give away for free. Picture this, you've spent 10 months bleeding for a company, sacrificing weekends, relationships, and sleep to build something revolutionary. You've been living on takeout and caffeine, dreaming about the $80,000 bonus that's going to pay off your student loans, give you a down payment on a real home, maybe even let you take that trip to Europe you've been postponing for 3 years. $80,000. That wasn't just money, it was my freedom. I was sitting across from Nolan Tripp in his corner office overlooking Halifax Harbor, watching him fidget with his Rolex while he delivered the news that would shatter everything I'd worked for. Callan, this is difficult, he began, avoiding eye contact like a coward. We're restructuring the retention department. Budget constraints have forced some tough decisions. My stomach dropped like a stone. What kind of decisions? Your position is being eliminated, effective immediately. 10 months of 60-hour weeks. A client retention rate of 96%, 6 points above their impossible target. And they were firing me? The day before my bonus was supposed to be approved. But the bonus, I stammered, my voice cracking. We had an agreement. I hit 96% retention. The payout was scheduled for approval at the end of this week. Nolan's expression didn't change. Cold as ice. The bonus was contingent on continued employment through Q4. Since you're being terminated, that agreement is void. In that moment, I realized this wasn't about budget constraints at all. This was about theft. But what I discovered next would prove that Nolan Tripp had made the biggest mistake of his career. Have you ever felt that moment when reality shifts beneath your feet and you realize someone you trusted has been playing you for months? That's what hit me as I sat in that chair, watching Nolan steal my future with corporate doublespeak. I don't understand, I said, fighting to keep my voice steady. My department generated 40% more revenue this quarter than ever before. The client feedback has been incredible. You're eliminating the most successful program in company history to save money? This bonus wasn't just numbers on a paycheck. It was my escape plan. My student loans were drowning me at $1,200 a month. My apartment was a shoebox I shared with 2 roommates. That $80,000 was my ticket to adult independence. My own place, my own life, my own future. Nolan shifted uncomfortably, his fingers drumming against his mahogany desk. These decisions come from above my pay grade, Callan. Corporate strategy, market pressures, you understand. But I didn't understand. Nothing about this made sense, and his body language screamed deception. What about my team? What about the retention framework I built from scratch? We'll be transitioning those responsibilities to existing staff. More cost-effective. Cost-effective. They were going to steal my innovation, hand it to someone making half my salary, and pocket the $80,000 they owed me. The audacity was breathtaking. I need you to clean out your desk and surrender your access cards within the hour, Nolan continued, sliding a manila envelope across his desk like he was doing me a favor. Here's your severance package. 2 weeks' pay, as per company policy. 2 weeks' pay. After delivering record-breaking results that probably earned the company millions. As I sat there absorbing this betrayal, something caught my eye on Nolan's computer monitor. He'd minimized a window, but I could see part of an expense report in the corner, an expense report with my name on it. He must have forgotten to close it, or maybe he thought I wouldn't notice the corner of my name near the vendor list. For charges I'd never approved. Is there anything else? He asked, clearly eager to end this conversation and celebrate his theft. Just one question, I said, standing up with the envelope in my hands. How long have you been planning this? His hesitation told me everything I needed to know. The next hour was a blur of humiliation. Security escort. Cardboard box. Coworkers averting their eyes as I packed up 2 years of my life into a container that barely fit my coffee mug and desk plant. Jerry from security. A sweet grandfather who always asked about my weekend plans, looked genuinely pained as he waited by my cubicle. I'm sorry about this, Callan. You're one of the good ones. Thanks, Jerry, I managed, stuffing my personal items into the box with shaking hands. Romy Blythe, our executive assistant, appeared at my desk with tears in her eyes. This is insane, Callan. Everyone knows how hard you work. Your retention numbers are legendary. I'd always liked Romy. She was one of the few people in management who treated everyone with genuine kindness, regardless of their position. Her husband Elliot ran compliance with an iron fist, but Romy had a warmth that balanced out his intensity. Thanks, Romy. That means a lot. Listen, she said, glancing around nervously, I overheard Nolan on a strange call yesterday about expense reviews and audit concerns. Something felt off about it. If you want to know what really happened here, call me tonight. I have access to executive calendars and meeting notes. There's something you need to see. Jerry cleared his throat. Time to go, miss. As I walked toward the elevator with my pathetic cardboard box, I caught a glimpse of Nolan watching from his office window. He was on the phone, laughing about something. Laughing. On the day he destroyed my career and stolen my bonus, he was laughing. But by the time those elevator doors closed, something had shifted inside me. I wasn't just angry anymore. I was curious. And curiosity, as I was about to discover, was a very dangerous thing. That evening, I sat in my apartment staring at my phone, debating whether to call Romy. Part of me wanted to just move on, start applying for new jobs, and try to forget about maritime solutions. But the other part, the part that had spent 10 months building something extraordinary only to have it stolen, needed answers. At 8:47 p.m., I dialed her number. Callan. Thank God you called. Can you meet me tomorrow morning? Somewhere private. What's this about, Romy? I can't explain over the phone. Too risky. Do you know the Tim Hortons on Barrington Street? The one near the courthouse? Yes, but 9 a.m. Come alone. And Callan? Her voice dropped to a whisper. Bring something to record with. You're going to want proof of what I'm about to show you. The line went dead. I spent the night tossing and turning, my mind racing with possibilities. What could Romy have discovered? Why the secrecy? Why did she sound so frightened? At 8:45 a.m., I was sitting in the Tim Hortons, nursing a coffee and watching the door. When Romy walked in, she looked like she hadn't slept either. Dark circles under her eyes, hair pulled back in a messy ponytail, constantly checking over her shoulder. She slid into the booth across from me and immediately pulled out a tablet. Before I show you this, she said, her hands trembling slightly, I need you to promise me something. What I'm about to reveal could destroy lives. Multiple lives. Including mine. Romy, you're scaring me. Promise me you'll be careful with this information. Promise me you'll think before you act. I nodded, though I had no idea what I was agreeing to. She turned the tablet toward me, and what I saw made my blood run cold. The screen showed an email thread from 3 weeks ago. The subject line read, Ridge Q4 Review, Timeline Confirmation. My hand started shaking as I read the exchange between Nolan and the CFO. Nolan, Confirm we're proceeding with Ridge transition before Q4 compensation review. Legal confirms we're covered under restructuring provisions. Proceed as discussed. CFO, confirmed. Will execute post Q3 close. Ridge framework transition to junior resources shows significant optimization potential. Q4 liability addressed per discussion. NT corporate speak, Romy whispered, seeing my confusion. They planned your firing specifically to avoid paying your bonus. Q4 liability means your $80,000. They'd planned my termination the moment they realized I might actually succeed. There's more, Romy continued, swiping to the next email. This one was worse. Much worse. NT, need to discuss expense approvals under Ridge credentials. Audit trail shows patterns we need to address before investigation. Meet Thursday 2 p.m. to align story. CFO, expense approvals under my credentials. My stomach dropped as the pieces clicked into place. Romy, are you saying someone's been using your login to approve expenses? Expenses you never saw. And now they're panicking because they think an audit might expose it. I scrolled through more emails, my horror growing with each revelation. Hotel stays in Toronto. Consulting fees for services never rendered. Vendor payments to companies that didn't exist. All approved under my name. All totaling nearly $60,000 over 6 months. They're not just stealing your bonus, Callan. They're setting you up to take the fall for embezzlement. My vision blurred with rage. Who's doing this? Romy hesitated, then swiped to a final email that made everything crystal clear. The sender's name made me gasp out loud. The email was from Nolan Tripp's personal account to his corporate account, sent at 11:43 p.m. on a Sunday night. Reminder, Ridge meeting Tuesday morning. Ensure expense cleanup complete before termination. Cannot afford investigation connecting approvals to executive access. Romy has been handling documentation transfers per our discussion. Timeline critical. I stared at the screen in disbelief. Romy has been handling documentation transfers? Romy's face crumpled. Callan, I'm so sorry. I didn't know what he was doing. He told me he needed help organizing expense reports for a board presentation. He said it was confidential, that's why he had me use your credentials instead of creating a new access point. You've been approving expenses under my name? I thought I was helping with legitimate business costs. Hotel stays for client meetings, consulting fees for industry analysis. He showed me the invoices, the meeting schedules, everything looked proper. My mind raced. When did this start? About 6 months ago. Right after you launched the retention program and started getting attention from senior management. Her voice was barely audible. Oh God, Callan. He's been planning this since the beginning, hasn't he? The timeline was devastating. The moment my work started generating real value for the company, Nolan had begun orchestrating my downfall. Romy, do you still have access to these expense records? Yes, but I need copies. All of them. Every fake invoice, every fraudulent approval, every piece of evidence showing this was systematic fraud. She hesitated. If I give you this information, and you use it against the company, I could lose my job. Elliot could lose his job. We just bought a house, Callan. We can't afford, and if you don't give it to me, I go to prison for embezzlement while Nolan keeps living his luxury lifestyle on stolen money. The choice was clear, but I could see the anguish in her eyes. There's something else, she whispered. Something that changes everything. She pulled up one more file, and what I saw there would give me the weapon I needed for perfect revenge. The file was a video, a Microsoft Teams recording from 2 weeks ago labeled, Executive Strategy Session, Confidential. He forgot to stop recording, Romy explained, her voice tight with anxiety. I was organizing his files when I found it. She pressed play, and I watched Nolan's office come into view. He was sitting at his desk with a glass of wine, but he wasn't alone. Someone was moving around in the background, someone I recognized immediately. It was Romy herself. On the recording, she walked over to Nolan's desk wearing a black dress I'd never seen her wear to work. The timestamp showed 9:47 p.m. on a Tuesday night. "Baby, you need to relax," her voice came through the speakers. "The Ridge situation is handled. She'll be gone by Friday, and there's no way to trace any of this back to us." My jaw dropped. Us? On screen, Nolan pulled her into his lap. What if she gets suspicious? What if she digs too deep before we can execute the termination? She won't. I've been monitoring her access logs. She hasn't looked at anything outside her normal scope. She has no idea the expense approvals are happening. I looked at the real Romy sitting across from me, tears streaming down her face. "It's not what it looks like," she whispered desperately. But the recording continued. I watched in horror as Nolan kissed her neck and said, "Good thing your husband is so focused on his compliance work. Elliot has no idea his wife is helping me steal from his own company." "Don't talk about Elliot," Romy's recorded voice replied. "This is business. Once Ridge is gone and the audit trail is cleaned up, we're done. No more meetings, no more risks. No more of this either." Nolan's hands moved to her waist. "We agreed, after Friday, everything goes back to normal." I paused the video and stared at Romy, who was sobbing into her hands. "How long?" I asked coldly. "It doesn't matter. It's over. It was a mistake, all of it." "How long?" "8 months, she whispered. "But Callan, you have to understand." But I wasn't listening anymore. Because I'd just realized that this recording wasn't just evidence of an affair. It was evidence of conspiracy. And I had it all on video. "You've been sleeping with him for 8 months while helping him frame me for embezzlement," I said, my voice deadly calm. "It wasn't supposed to go this far. It started as just stress relief. The company was struggling, everyone was working crazy hours, and Elliot was never home because of all his compliance projects. So you decided to destroy my career instead of fixing your marriage?" "No. I never wanted to hurt you." When Nolan asked me to help with the expense reports, I thought it was legitimate. By the time I realized what was happening, I was already in too deep. I closed the tablet and slid it back to her. "But you kept helping him. You kept approving fraudulent expenses under my name. You kept meeting him after hours." I was scared. If I stopped helping, he threatened to tell Elliot about the affair. If I told anyone about the fraud, he'd make sure I went down with him. Classic manipulation. Nolan had trapped her in a web of compromised choices, and she'd chosen to sacrifice me rather than herself. "Why are you showing me this now?" "Because yesterday, after you were fired, he told me there was one more thing we needed to do." Her voice broke. "He wants me to plant evidence in your personnel file. Fake performance reviews suggesting you were struggling. Forged emails showing you requesting access to financial systems." The scope of his planning was breathtaking. He wasn't just stealing, he was constructing an elaborate frame job. "When?" "Tomorrow morning." He scheduled a fake audit meeting to get everyone out of HR for 2 hours. I sat back in the booth, my mind racing. Tomorrow morning, Nolan and Romy would complete their frame job, making it impossible for me to prove my innocence. By Monday, I'd be facing criminal charges while they celebrated their successful heist. Unless I struck first. If you're following this story and wondering what you'd do in my position, drop a like and let me know in the comments, because what I decided next would change everything. "Romy, I need you to do something for me." She looked up from her tear-stained hands. What? I need you to keep that meeting tomorrow. Do exactly what Nolan expects. Are you insane? I just told you he wants me to frame you. I know. And you're going to help him do it. Her confusion was visible. I don't understand. The recording shows you and Nolan discussing the fraud, but it doesn't show you actually committing it. The emails show someone using my credentials, but they don't prove you knew it was illegal. So right now, you're a victim of manipulation who got caught up in something bigger than you understood. But if you plant evidence tomorrow, you become an active co-conspirator. She was starting to get it. You want me to record the evidence planting? I want you to record everything. The conversation where he asks you to do it. The actual act of planting the evidence. His reaction when you express doubts. All of it. And then what? Then you're going to help me destroy him. The idea was taking shape in my mind like a perfectly designed system, which, in a way, it was. I'd spent 10 months building retention frameworks based on understanding human behavior and motivation. This was just a different kind of framework. What about Elliot? When this comes out, he'll know about the affair. I leaned forward. Romy, your marriage might survive an affair. It won't survive your husband discovering you helped embezzle from his company. Especially when it comes out during a criminal investigation. The truth hit her like a physical blow. She was trapped between two terrible choices, and I was offering her a third option, redemption through cooperation. What exactly are you asking me to do? First, we're going to document every piece of evidence Nolan has created. Every fake expense, every forged approval, every fraudulent invoice. And then? Then we're going to give it all to the one person who can't ignore it, can't cover it up, and can't let it slide. Who? I hated trusting her again after everything she'd done. But right now, she was the only one who could deliver the kind of proof that could save me. And more importantly, she was the only one who truly understood how deep Nolan's deception ran. I smiled for the first time in 2 days. Your husband. That afternoon, Romy and I spent 3 hours in a coffee shop across town, planning the most important performance of her life. The key is to act normal, I explained. Don't seem reluctant or suspicious. Nolan is expecting you to be nervous about the evidence planting, that's natural. But you can't seem like you're working against him. What if he gets suspicious? What if he realizes I'm recording? He won't. He's arrogant, he thinks he's in complete control, and he trusts you because you've been sleeping with him for 8 months. She flinched at the bluntness, but I needed her to understand the psychology we were dealing with. Why aren't we just going to the police with what we already have? She asked. Because without concrete proof of a crime in progress, no DA would take this seriously. Corporate expense disputes happen all the time. We need to catch him in the act of evidence tampering. That's when this becomes a clear-cut criminal case. Your phone has a voice recording app, right? Yes. Use it. Keep your phone in your purse, recording throughout the entire meeting. We need his voice clearly stating that he wants you to plant false evidence in my personnel file. What about the actual evidence planting? That's trickier. You'll need to use your phone's camera, but you have to make it look like you're just nervous and fidgeting with your phone. Can you do that? She nodded, though her hands were shaking. Romy, I need you to understand something. Once we do this, there's no going back. Nolan will be fired, probably arrested. Your affair will come out. Your marriage will be tested in ways you can't imagine. I know. Are you prepared for that? She was quiet for a long moment, staring out the window at the Halifax traffic. 8 months ago, I made a choice that hurt my husband and compromised my integrity. Tomorrow, I have a chance to make a different choice. Even if it costs you everything. Especially if it costs me everything. She looked back at me with new determination. What Nolan did to you is unforgivable. What I helped him do is unforgivable. I can't undo the damage, but I can make sure it stops here. That evening, I helped her practice. We rehearsed different scenarios, anticipated Nolan's responses, and planned for contingencies. But as I drove home that night, I realized there was one element of the plan I hadn't shared with Romy. Because some revenge requires a personal touch. Friday morning arrived with that peculiar clarity that comes before life-changing events. I woke at 5 a.m., unable to sleep, and spent an hour reviewing every detail of our plan. At 7:30, Romy texted me. He confirmed the meeting. 9 a.m. in his office. HR will be in conference room C4, audit preparation from 9 to 11. Perfect. Nolan had scheduled exactly the window we needed. At 8:45, I positioned myself in the Starbucks across the street from Maritime Solutions, with a clear view of the building entrance. I watched Romy walk through the glass doors at 8:52, her purse positioned exactly as we'd practiced. My phone buzzed with a text, recording started. Wish me luck. You've got this, I replied. Justice is coming. The next 2 hours were the longest of my life. I sat in that coffee shop, drinking terrible coffee and refreshing my email every 30 seconds, waiting for word from Romy. At 10:17, my phone rang. It's done, she whispered. I got everything. His instructions, the evidence planting, even his reaction when I pretended to have doubts about it. How did he react? Exactly like you predicted. Arrogant, dismissive, completely confident that he's untouchable. What about the physical evidence? Planted as requested. But Callan, I also made copies of everything before planting it. The fake performance reviews, the forged emails, we have originals showing they were created yesterday. My heart raced. We had him. We had everything we needed to prove systematic fraud, evidence tampering, and conspiracy. Where are you now? Back at my desk. Nolan is in meetings all afternoon. He thinks everything went perfectly. Good. Now comes the hard part. What do you mean? Now we have to tell your husband that his wife has been having an affair with the man who's been embezzling from his company. The silence on the line stretched for nearly a minute. Romy? I'm here. I'm just scared. I know. But we're past the point of easy choices now. That afternoon, would discover that Elliot Blythe's reaction to our revelation would be far more explosive than either of us anticipated. At 3 p.m., I sat in the parking lot of Maritime Solutions, waiting for Elliot Blythe to finish his day. Romy had arranged for him to meet us at a restaurant downtown, neutral territory for what was about to be the most difficult conversation of their marriage. The Coastal Cafe was nearly empty on a Friday afternoon, which was perfect for our purposes. Elliot arrived exactly on time, looking puzzled but not yet suspicious. Romy said you needed to discuss something urgent, he asked, settling into the booth across from us. I'd rehearsed this moment, but facing Elliot, a man I respected, a man whose life I was about to shatter, made everything feel real in a way that planning hadn't. Elliot, what I'm about to tell you is going to be difficult to hear. But I need you to listen to everything before you react. His expression shifted to concern. Is someone hurt? Is there a safety issue at the company? There's a criminal issue at the company. Someone has been embezzling funds and framing employees to cover it up. Now I had his full attention. Elliot's background was corporate compliance. Financial crimes were exactly his area of expertise. How much are we talking about? At least $60,000 over 6 months. Possibly more. Who's the target of the frame job? Me. He looked confused. But you were terminated this week. How could you be embezzling if you're no longer employed? Because the embezzlement has been ongoing for months, using my credentials to approve fraudulent expenses. My termination was designed to prevent me from discovering the fraud and to eliminate the bonus they owed me. Elliot's analytical mind was processing the implications. Who has access to your credentials? I glanced at Romy, whose face had gone pale. This was the moment of truth. That's the complicated part, I said. The person committing the fraud is Nolan Tripp. But he had help from someone with administrative access to the expense system. Who? Romy's voice was barely a whisper. Me. The word hung in the air like a bomb waiting to explode. Elliot's face went through a series of expressions: confusion, disbelief, realization, and finally, devastation. You helped Nolan embezzle from my company? I didn't know what it was. He told me. How long? Elliot, please, let me explain. How long, Romy? The question carried the weight of a marriage hanging in the balance. 8 months, Romy whispered. Elliot's face went white. 8 months. You've been helping Nolan commit fraud against my company for 8 months. I thought I was helping with legitimate expenses. He showed me invoices, meeting schedules. Don't. His voice was sharp. Don't insult my intelligence. You've been married to a compliance officer for 6 years. You know what expense fraud looks like. I watched their marriage disintegrate in real time, feeling both sympathy and satisfaction. This was justice, but it was also devastating for everyone involved. There's more, I said quietly. Elliot turned to me with eyes that had gone cold. More fraud. More betrayal. I slid my phone across the table, the team's recording queued up. You need to see this. He watched 30 seconds before pushing the phone away. I don't need to see any more. Elliot, I'm sorry, Romy started. Are you? Are you really sorry? Or are you sorry you got caught? His voice was deadly calm. Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like you made a series of calculated choices to betray our marriage and my career. It wasn't supposed to go this far, but it did. And now I have to decide whether to report my own wife for embezzlement. The weight of the moment settled over us. Elliot wasn't just discovering an affair, he was discovering that his wife had compromised his professional integrity and potentially destroyed his career. What evidence do you have? He asked me. I pulled out the tablet Romy had given me. Everything. The original email chains planning my termination. The expense records showing fraudulent approvals. The recording of Nolan and Romy discussing the conspiracy. And as of this morning, video evidence of them planting false evidence in my personnel file. Elliot reviewed the materials with professional detachment, but I could see the personal pain in his eyes. This is prosecutable, he said finally. Multiple felonies. Conspiracy, embezzlement, fraud, evidence tampering. What are you going to do? Romy asked. He looked at his wife, really looked at her, for the first time since we'd started talking. I'm going to do my job, he said. And then I'm going to figure out if we have anything left to save. But what Elliot did next would surprise both of us. Instead of standing up and walking away, Elliot leaned forward and looked directly at me. Callan, I need you to understand something. What Romy and Nolan did to you is inexcusable. But if we handle this wrong, they might escape consequences entirely. What do you mean? Corporate investigations are political. Nolan has relationships with board members, influence with senior management. If we simply report this through normal channels, there's a risk it gets buried or minimized. I hadn't considered that possibility, but it made sense. Nolan wouldn't have attempted such an elaborate fraud if he didn't feel protected by his position. What are you suggesting? We need ironclad evidence that can't be disputed or covered up. We need Nolan to incriminate himself so thoroughly that the company has no choice but to act. Romy looked confused. But we already have the recording, the emails. We have evidence of past crimes, Elliot corrected. For a second, he looked like a husband in pain, staring at the woman who'd betrayed him. Then his expression hardened. He was a compliance officer again. But we need evidence of ongoing intent. We need him to confess to the full scope of the fraud. I was starting to understand. You want to set him up. I want to give him enough rope to hang himself. Elliot's expression was grimly determined. And I think I know exactly how to do it. He pulled out his phone and showed us his calendar. Monday morning, I have a routine compliance meeting with all department heads, including Nolan. I'm going to tell him that our quarterly audit has flagged some expense irregularities that need explanation. Won't that make him suspicious? It should make him nervous. Nervous enough to reach out to his co-conspirator for reassurance. He looked at Romy with an expression I couldn't quite read. Are you willing to wear a wire? The question stunned both of us. You want me to record him? I want you to give him one final opportunity to confess everything. If he does, we have him completely. If he doesn't, we proceed with what we already have. And if he gets suspicious? Then we find out exactly how dangerous Nolan Tripp really is. I realized that Elliot wasn't just seeking justice, he was seeking the complete truth about what his wife had done and why. This final recording would either prove that Romy was a victim of manipulation or reveal that she was a willing participant in the conspiracy. Either way, Monday morning would change everything. Saturday morning, Elliot met us at a surveillance equipment store in downtown Dartmouth. The owner, a retired police detective named Frank, specialized in corporate investigation tools. What we need is audio quality that will hold up in legal proceedings, Elliot explained. Clean, clear recordings with no possibility of claiming they were edited or manipulated. Frank showed us a device the size of a large button that could be sewn into clothing. 8-hour battery life, professional-grade audio capture, virtually undetectable. As Frank fitted the device into one of Romy's work blazers, I watched her face. She looked terrified but determined, like someone who had finally accepted the consequences of her choices. Remember, Elliot told her, your job is to get him talking. Let him feel like he's in control, like he's explaining the situation to someone who needs reassurance. What if he asks me to do something else illegal? Agree to it. We need evidence of ongoing criminal intent. The plan was simple. Romy would approach Nolan after Elliot's compliance meeting, expressing concern about the audit investigation. She would let Nolan explain how they would handle the situation, hopefully getting him to detail the full scope of their crimes. What about afterward? Romy asked. When this comes out, when he realizes I betrayed him? Elliot's expression was unreadable. That's a bridge we'll cross when we come to it. Sunday evening, we met one final time to review the plan. Romy would initiate contact with Nolan around 11 a.m., after giving him time to stew over Elliot's audit announcement. Are you ready for this? I asked her. No. But that doesn't matter anymore. She looked at her husband, who was reviewing legal procedures on his laptop. I made choices that hurt people I care about. Tomorrow, I start making different choices. As I drove home that night, I realized that Monday wouldn't just bring justice for me. It would bring a reckoning for everyone involved. And some reckonings, I was about to learn, are more brutal than others. Monday morning, 9 a.m. sharp, Elliot walked into the executive conference room where Nolan and 4 other department heads were waiting for their weekly compliance briefing. I wasn't there, obviously, but Elliot had agreed to text me updates throughout the morning. At 9:47, my phone buzzed, mentioned audit flags. Nolan's reaction was, interesting. At 10:15. Meeting ended. Nolan stayed behind to ask clarifying questions about audit scope. At 10:33, he's definitely panicked. Asked specifically about expense approval patterns. At 11:02, Romy made contact. Recording active. The next hour was the longest of my life. I sat in my apartment, staring at my phone, waiting for word about whether our plan was working. At 12:17, my phone rang. Romy's voice was shaking. "It's done. I got everything." "What did he say?" "More than we expected. Much more." She gave me the address of a parking garage downtown. "Meet us there in 20 minutes. You need to hear this immediately." When I arrived, Elliot was already reviewing the recording on a specialized playback device. His expression was grim. "How bad is it?" I asked. "Worse than we thought." He handed me earphones. "Listen to this." I heard Romy's voice, nervous but controlled. "Nolan, Elliot mentioned some audit concerns this morning. Should I be worried about anything?" Nolan's response was immediate and damning: "The expense approvals." Shit. I was hoping we had more time before they started looking at patterns. What patterns? The Ridge approvals, obviously. But also the Henderson account, the Baxter consulting fees, the phantom vendor payments. Jesus, Romy, we've been running this operation for over a year. If they do a full audit, they're going to find everything. My heart stopped. Henderson? Morrison? Those were names I didn't recognize, which meant the fraud was far bigger than even I had realized. The recording continued with Nolan detailing a criminal enterprise that had stolen over $200,000 from Maritime Solutions, using not just my credentials but those of other employees who had been terminated under suspicious circumstances. "We need to clean house," Nolan said on the recording. "Delete files, alter records, maybe even plant some evidence suggesting Ridge was working with outside accomplices. More evidence planting? Whatever it takes. I'm not going to prison because some compliance audit got lucky." But the most chilling moment came at the end of the recording. "What about Elliot?" Romy asked. "What if he gets suspicious about my involvement?" Nolan's laugh was cold. "Then Elliot has an accident. Industrial accidents happen all the time in corporate settings." I ripped off the earphones. "He threatened to kill your husband?" Elliot's face was stone. "That threat just escalated this from embezzlement to conspiracy to commit murder." Suddenly, our revenge plot had become something much more serious. We weren't just exposing fraud anymore. We were stopping a killer. "We have to go to the police," I said immediately. "This is beyond corporate crime now." "Not yet," Elliot replied, his voice eerily calm. "We need to make sure we have enough evidence to guarantee prosecution. One recording isn't enough. We need corroborating evidence of the broader fraud scheme." "Are you insane?" "He threatened to kill you." He made a vague threat in the heat of panic. That's not the same as an actual murder plot. Elliot was thinking like a compliance officer, not like a husband whose life had been threatened. But his mention of Henderson and Morrison gives us new leads to investigate. Who are Henderson and Morrison? Former employees. Both terminated within the last 18 months under circumstances similar to yours. I felt sick. How many people has he framed? We're about to find out. Elliot pulled out his laptop. I'm going to run a forensic analysis of all expense approvals over the past 2 years. If there's a pattern, we'll find it. While Elliot worked, Romy sat in stunned silence. The weight of what she'd been part of was finally hitting her. I helped him destroy other people's careers, she whispered. People with families, mortgages, dreams, and I helped him steal their lives. Yes, you did, I said bluntly. But now you have a chance to help stop him before he destroys anyone else. Elliot's analysis took 3 hours. When he finished, his face was grim. 5 employees over 2 years. Total theft, $347,000. All terminated just before major bonus payments or stock option vestings. Jesus. It gets worse. 3 of the 5 employees were subsequently blacklisted in the industry. Couldn't find comparable jobs. One filed for bankruptcy. Another lost his house. The scope of Nolan's cruelty was breathtaking. He hadn't just stolen money, he'd systematically destroyed lives. What do we do now? Now we spring the final trap. Elliot's expression was coldly determined. Romy, I need you to call Nolan. Tell him you're scared about the audit, that you think we should clean up all the evidence tonight. Tonight? We're going to catch him in the act of destroying evidence. And this time, we're going to have the police waiting. As Romy dialed Nolan's number, I realized that our quest for justice was about to become something much more dangerous. Because cornered criminals don't always surrender quietly. Nolan, it's me, Romy said into the phone, her voice perfectly calibrated to sound panicked. I can't stop thinking about what you said earlier. About the audit, about cleaning house. I think we need to act tonight. I could hear Nolan's muffled response through the speaker. Are you sure? If we wait until tomorrow, no, Romy interrupted, following the script we'd rehearsed. I barely slept last night. Every time I close my eyes, I see Elliot asking questions I can't answer. We need to finish this before I lose my nerve. A long pause. Then, all right. Meet me at the office at 10 p.m. Use the service entrance, security is lighter on weeknight shifts. What about the camera systems? I've got admin access to the security network. I can create a temporary blind spot in the records. Even in his panic, Nolan was thinking like a professional criminal. The level of premeditation was staggering. Okay, Romy said. I'll be there. After she hung up, Elliot immediately called the Halifax Regional Police Fraud Division. Within an hour, Detective Inspector Patricia Knox was sitting in our makeshift command center, reviewing our evidence. This is impressive work, she admitted. Professional-grade documentation, clear audio recordings, corroborating financial evidence. You've built a solid case. Solid enough for tonight? Elliot asked. More than solid enough. We'll have officers positioned around the building, surveillance equipment monitoring the office, and a full arrest team ready to move the moment he begins destroying evidence. What about Romy's safety? She'll be wearing a wire and a GPS tracker. The moment anything goes wrong, we can have officers inside the building within 30 seconds. As evening approached, the weight of what we were attempting settled over all of us. We weren't just exposing fraud anymore, we were conducting a sting operation against a man who had threatened murder. Are you sure about this? I asked Romy as we prepared for the final confrontation. I've never been more sure of anything in my life, she replied. 8 months ago, I made a choice that led to all of this. Tonight, I make a different choice. At 9:30 p.m., we watched from a surveillance van as Romy walked toward the Maritime Solutions building, wired for sound and ready to face the man who had manipulated her into betraying everything she believed in. But what none of us anticipated was how desperate, and dangerous, Nolan Tripp would become when he realized he'd been trapped. The Maritime Solutions building looked different at night, darker, more ominous, like a place where corporate crimes were meant to happen. Through our surveillance equipment, we watched Romy approach the service entrance at exactly 10 p.m. Audio check, Detective Knox said into her radio. Signal clear, came the response. Subject is inside the building. We listened as Romy's footsteps echoed through empty hallways, her breathing slightly elevated but controlled. She found Nolan in his office, already busy shredding documents. Thank God you're here, his voice came through our speakers. I've been destroying files for an hour, but there's too much to handle alone. What exactly are we eliminating? Everything. The fake invoices, the altered approval chains, the shadow vendor accounts, anything that could connect us to the money. Perfect. He was confessing to evidence destruction while actually destroying evidence, creating multiple charges for prosecutors. What about the digital records? Already handled. I've got admin access to the accounting servers. We'll wipe the audit trails, corrupt the backup files, maybe even plant some evidence suggesting a cyber attack. The scope of his cover-up was breathtaking. He wasn't just hiding his crimes. He was prepared to sabotage the entire company's financial systems to protect himself. Nolan, what if this doesn't work? What if they find something we missed? Then we disappear. I've got offshore accounts, false identities, an exit strategy that's been in place for months. My blood ran cold. He'd been planning to flee the country, leaving everyone else to face the consequences of his crimes. What about me? What about my life here? You're coming with me, obviously. We're partners now, Romy. Partners in everything. But then something in his voice shifted. Although I have to ask, how did you know to suggest we clean up tonight? Earlier today, you seemed much more confident about our security. The question hung in the air like a loaded gun. I just got scared after thinking about it more, Romy replied, but I could hear the tension in her voice. Scared. Right. Nolan's tone had gone cold. Or maybe someone gave you a reason to be scared. Through our surveillance equipment, we watched him move closer to Romy. Detective Knox, I whispered urgently, something's wrong. But she was already mobilizing her team. Nolan, what are you talking about? Romy's voice was steady, but I could hear her fear. I'm talking about the fact that your husband asked very specific questions about expense approval patterns today. Questions that suggested he knew exactly what to look for. That's his job. He's head of compliance. His job is quarterly audits, not targeted fraud investigations. Unless someone gave him a reason to investigate fraud. Through the surveillance feed, we watched Nolan circling Romy like a predator. You told him, didn't you? You told Elliot about us. I would never, stop lying. His voice exploded through our speakers. Nobody else knew about the expense scheme. Nobody else had access to the information. It had to be you. Detective Knox was already signaling her team to move, but they were still minutes away from the office. Nolan, please, you're scaring me, good. You should be scared. Do you have any idea what you've done? What you've cost me? I haven't done anything. You've ruined everything. 2 years of planning, hundreds of thousands of dollars, my entire future, destroyed because you couldn't keep your mouth shut. I watched in horror as Nolan grabbed Romy's purse and dumped it on his desk. Her phone clattered across the surface, still recording. A wire. Of course. His laugh was bitter. How long have you been recording me, Romy? I don't know what you're talking about, don't. Just don't. He picked up the phone and spoke directly into it. I know you're listening, Elliot. Your wife has been very helpful, but I think our partnership is coming to an end. He smashed the phone against the wall, cutting our audio feed. Team 1, move now. Detective Knox barked into her radio. Suspect has discovered surveillance. Officer safety priority. But we were too far away. Whatever happened next, Romy would face alone. And Nolan Tripp had already proven he was willing to kill to protect his secrets. The next 3 minutes lasted forever. We had no audio, no visual of the office interior, and no way to know if Romy was safe. Then Detective Knox's radio crackled, Team 1 in position. Suspect and victim visible through office window. No immediate violence observed. What's their status? Suspect appears to be restraining victim. Attempting negotiation. Knox grabbed her radio. This is Detective Inspector Knox, Halifax Regional Police. Nolan Tripp, we know you're in there. We have the building surrounded. Release Romy Blythe and come out with your hands visible. For 30 seconds, nothing happened. Then Nolan's voice echoed through the building's PA system. He'd activated the office intercom. Detective Knox, I presume? I have to say, this is all very dramatic. But I think you're misunderstanding the situation here. What situation is that, Nolan? The situation where I'm the victim of an elaborate conspiracy. You see, Romy Blythe and her husband have been embezzling from this company for over a year. They used Callan Ridge as a scapegoat, and when Ridge got suspicious, they decided to frame me. The audacity was breathtaking. Even with overwhelming evidence against him, he was trying to flip the narrative. That's an interesting theory, Nolan. Why don't you come out and we can discuss it? I don't think so. You see, I have evidence of the Blythe's crimes right here in my office. Financial records, altered documents, even recordings of them planning to frame innocent employees. He was stalling, but for what? What was his endgame? Here's what's going to happen, Nolan continued. I'm going to walk out of this building with Mrs. Blythe, and we're going to drive to the media. I'm going to expose the real criminals in this story. That's not going to happen, Nolan. It is. Because if you try to stop me, I'll make sure the evidence of the Blythe's crimes disappears forever. And without that evidence, you'll never be able to prove what really happened here. Knox looked at Elliot. Is there any chance his story could hold up? None. We have recordings of him confessing to everything. But does he know that? I realized what Knox was thinking. Nolan believed he'd destroyed our only evidence when he smashed Romy's phone. He didn't know about the backup recordings, the financial analysis, or the broader investigation. He thinks he's holding all the cards, I said. Then let's show him he's wrong. But what happened next would prove that desperate criminals are capable of anything. Loving this story? Hit that like button and share it with someone who appreciates justice being served, because we're about to witness the most satisfying takedown you've ever seen. Detective Knox keyed her radio with a smile that was part professional, part predatory. Nolan, I appreciate your concern about the evidence, but I think you're operating under some false assumptions. What assumptions? The assumption that Romy's phone was our only recording device. The assumption that we haven't been building a case against you for weeks. And the assumption that you have any leverage in this situation. Even through the intercom, we could hear the change in Nolan's breathing. What are you talking about? I'm talking about the fact that we have recordings of you confessing to embezzling $347,000. We have financial forensics proving you framed 5 different employees. We have evidence of you destroying corporate records. And we have you on tape threatening to murder Elliot Blythe. The silence stretched for nearly a minute. You're bluffing. Detective Patterson, please play recording Exhibit A7 for Mr. Tripp. Patterson's voice came through a portable speaker, the expense approvals. Shit. I was hoping we had more time before they started looking at patterns. Nolan's own voice, crystal clear, admitting to the fraud. Exhibit B12, please. Then Elliot has an accident. Industrial accidents happen all the time in corporate settings. His threat against Elliot, recorded just hours earlier. Should I continue, Nolan? Because we have 17 hours of recordings, 3 independent witnesses, and enough evidence to put you away for 20 years. Another long silence. Then the office door opened, and Nolan walked out with his hands raised. Romy followed behind him, shaken but unharmed. As the officers cuffed him, Nolan looked directly at me through the surveillance van's window. This isn't over, Ridge, he called out. You think you've won, but you have no idea what you've started. But I wasn't afraid anymore. Justice was finally being served. The man who had stolen my career, my bonus, and nearly my freedom was being led away in handcuffs. And somehow, that felt better than revenge ever could have. 6 weeks later, I was reading the Halifax Chronicle-Herald's front-page story with my morning coffee: Maritime Solutions executive sentenced to 8 years for embezzlement conspiracy. Nolan had pled guilty to avoid a trial that would have exposed even more victims. 8 years in federal prison, plus full restitution. The company had settled my wrongful termination lawsuit for triple my original bonus, $240,000, plus damages. But the real satisfaction came from the phone call I'd received that morning. "Callan, this is James Henderson. I can't thank you enough. Because of your investigation, 3 companies have called about job opportunities. My wife and I might actually keep our house." Henderson was one of the 5 employees Nolan had framed over 2 years. His life had been destroyed by Nolan's greed, and now he was getting it back. "What about the others?" I asked. "All of them are being cleared. The company is paying settlements, providing references, even helping with job placement. You didn't just save yourself, you saved all of us." Maritime Solutions had offered me my job back, plus a promotion to head their new ethics compliance division. The irony was delicious: the woman they'd fired for fraud was now in charge of preventing it. I'd negotiated terms that would have made Nolan weep. $180,000 salary, stock options, and a clause that if anyone tried to fire me without cause, the severance would be a full year's pay. But there was one more surprise waiting. As I hung up with Henderson, my phone rang again. Unknown number. "Callan Ridge? This is Detective Inspector Knox. We need to talk." "About what?" "About the 3 other companies where Nolan pulled this exact same scheme. And about the 15 other victims who want to meet the woman who took him down." The scope of his criminal empire was even bigger than we discovered. 15 victims? I repeated, my blood running cold. "At least. We've been coordinating with authorities in Ontario and British Columbia. Nolan's been running this operation for 5 years across 4 companies. Total theft, over $800,000. Detective Knox's words hit me like a physical blow. While I'd been focused on my own case, there were 14 other people whose lives had been destroyed by the same man. "We found detailed files in his apartment," Knox continued. "Profiles of targets, timeline for each termination, even psychological notes about which employees would be least likely to fight back." Psychological notes? He studied his victims, Callan. Looked for people who were isolated, financially vulnerable, or too trusting to question authority. You were supposed to be an easy mark. The calculation was horrifying. Nolan hadn't just stolen money. He'd systematically hunted people he saw as weak. What he didn't count on, Knox said with satisfaction, was that his easy mark would turn out to be the person who brought down his entire operation. That afternoon, I received an email that made everything click into place. "Dear Ms. Ridge, my name is Catherine Turner. I'm an employee at Northwell Industries in Vancouver, and I believe my supervisor has been embezzling funds using my credentials. I read about your case in the Financial Ethics Journal, the embezzlement techniques you described, vendor shells and credential cloning, they're happening here too. I know this sounds crazy, but I think the person doing this to me might have learned from the same methods as the man you exposed. The patterns are almost identical. Can you help me figure out how to fight back?" Desperately hoping, Catherine, I stared at the email, realizing that Nolan's network might be bigger than even the police suspected. This wasn't over. It was just beginning. And I was about to become the one person every corporate criminal in Canada would learn to fear. 2 years after that terrible Tuesday when Nolan fired me, I was on the phone with Catherine Turner, walking her through the same techniques I'd used to expose Nolan. "Document everything," I told her. "Every suspicious expense, every unusual meeting, every moment when your gut tells you something's wrong. But what if I'm wrong? What if I ruin my career over a misunderstanding? Catherine, let me ask you something. How much is your peace of mind worth? As I helped her build her case, I realized something had fundamentally changed inside me. 6 months ago, I'd been a victim. Now I was something else entirely. I was a weapon. Over the next week, Catherine sent me evidence that made my case look simple. Her supervisor wasn't just embezzling, he was running a recruitment network, teaching other executives how to exploit employees using Nolan's methods. We're not just looking at individual crimes anymore, Detective Knox told me when I shared Catherine's evidence. We're looking at organized corporate crime. A network of executives sharing techniques for systematic employee exploitation. How big do you think it is? Based on what we're seeing, could be hundreds of victims across dozens of companies. The scope was staggering, but so was the opportunity. Detective Knox, what if I told you I had an idea for how to catch all of them? I'd say I'm listening. We don't just prosecute the ones we've found. We use them to find the others. We turn victims into investigators. We build a network that fights back. 3 months later, I was running the Corporate Justice Initiative, a joint program between law enforcement and employee advocacy groups. We'd helped expose fraud at 12 companies, recovered over $2 million in stolen wages, and put 8 executives behind bars. But the best part? The phone calls. Every week, I received calls from people like Catherine, employees who'd found the courage to fight back because they knew they weren't alone. And this is how I turned the worst betrayal of my career into the most dangerous thing a corporate criminal can face. An employee who refuses to be a victim. If this story inspired you to stand up for yourself, to fight back against workplace injustice, or to help someone else find their courage, show us some love by hitting that like button, subscribing, and sharing this with everyone who needs to hear it. Because sometimes the best revenge isn't just getting even, it's making sure it never happens to anyone else. Justice isn't just about punishment. It's about protection. And that's a war worth fighting.